So, yeah, I'm going to lead us in a Metta Bhavana meditation. We'll spend the first couple of moments just arriving, just allowing our minds to settle, our awareness to come into our bodies more, letting our bodies be held by the earth and gravity, allowing our physical experience just to yield to the forces of gravity and to the support of the earth. And feeling that your base is solid and that your torso is upright, you're not slouching, so that you can stay alert, or as alert as you can be. Alert and open. And just tuning in then to your mood, how you're feeling. You might have a very clear sense of what's going on for you in this way. There might be a particular emotion, very present and strong. So just acknowledging that. Or it might be just you're not sure, but there is some kind of mood there. So is it negative? Is it positive? Maybe it's just a bit vague. Just bringing more awareness to this area of your experience and just acknowledging whatever's going on. There's no right, there's no wrong. Just how you're feeling at the moment is how you're feeling. And we're not looking to analyze the feeling. We're not looking to suppress the feeling. We're just acknowledging whatever is there and knowing that we're bringing this into the meditation that we're about to start. First stage, connecting with, as best you can, a sense of metta, well-wishing for oneself, for one's own life. And you can do this by bringing to mind something that you do, that you really enjoy, that brings you a sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. It might be an activity, or maybe it's just a location and you like being there. Doing something, being somewhere that brings a sense of well-being, a sense of connectedness. And just allowing yourself to have this experience. Allow yourself to remember what it's like doing this thing or being in this place and the effect it has on you. The second stage, bringing to mind a friend, just spending a moment choosing someone. Often just the first person who comes to mind is the best person. Spending some time really bringing them to mind, getting a sense of their character, their spirit, what it is you admire about them, what it's like to be around them. The things they do in your life, in their life, that you respect. And always with this orientation of wishing them well. And remembering that the feelings we have for a friend, a neutral person, somebody we're finding difficult, they're always there, even if our mind wanders off, fades out, goes dreamy. They're there and they're in the body. They'll have a physical dimension. And spending time, if you can, in each stage, just feeling into that, the physical dimension of the admiration, the affection you feel for your friend, the wish that he or she is well and flourishes in his or her life. Third stage, the neutral person. So again, spending a moment deciding on someone who's in your life, makes some sort of appearance in your life, but you don't have a strong or much of an emotional connection with. You can spend some time just really trying to bring them to mind, what they look like, how they walk, how they speak, little mannerisms you might have noticed. From there, maybe a sense of them and their character. And what is it they do? Their work. Do you know other people in their life? Just getting a picture of them as much as you can. And doing all of this, then just having a sense of, well, what's your response to them? Is your response positive or is your response negative? Do you find you're curious in them, drawn to them? Or do you find when you bring them to mind, you don't really like them, actually, or you want to move away from them? And again, whatever your response is fine. It's not right or it's not wrong. It's just what your response is. Just acknowledging what the response is. But beyond this, deeper than this, is this intention to wish them well on their own terms. Hope that they too can lead a fulfilled life in the same way you hope your friend can or is. You hope that the neutral person can flourish. So this is the orientation, this is the intention. And with this stage, we can drift off quite easily because we don't have a strong emotional connection with the person. And that's okay. And that's why they're in the practice, because the world is full of neutral people. We meet them all the time. And we're trying to strengthen our responses to them, improve our responses to them. In the fourth stage, you're bringing to mind somebody you're having difficulty with. This could be somebody at work, it could be a friend, it could be somebody in your family, it could be somebody who you just don't get on with and you never really have. But they're in your life, you interact with them, and often the initial response in this stage can be quite strong when you bring the person to mind. You can feel pissed off, contracted, frustrated, all sorts of things. So the first part of this stage is just allowing the person to be there and noticing what your actual response is without getting caught up in stories or narratives or lost in memories or grievances. Just holding to your actual physical, emotional response to them and giving that some space and acknowledgement. So we're trying to feel what we feel without getting carried away by it. And if we can do this in this stage, then there is the opportunity to shift our perspective a little. Sometimes it mightn't be this evening, but sometimes we can shift our perspective. And even though we feel aggrieved, hurt, angry, whatever, we have a little sense of space. And in that space, we can at least be in their presence. And it's okay. It's okay to be in their presence. And sometimes we can even go a little further. And if we feel okay in their presence, even though we do feel aggrieved or whatever, we can also have an orientation of wishing them well, wishing that they're okay, and this tension, this difficulty between you, one day was no longer there. the fifth stage. So just quickly revisiting the practice so far, sense of metta for oneself, for a friend, or a neutral person, and the person you're finding difficult. And then just bringing more people into your awareness. Family, friends, people in work, people in your locality. Just with this orientation of wishing people well, wishing the best for them. And just allowing your awareness to broaden as much as it can out beyond your world, your environment, to places across the globe in the many different towns and cities, countries and rural areas inhabited by all of life. And wishing people well wherever they are. In a moment, I'm going to ring the bell to end the practice. So just spending this last moment or so, just letting go of any point of focus, just letting your mind rest, just allowing it to be still or wander or continue to connect with metta, whatever it wants to do, just allowing it to do that. Just sitting for the last moment or so. Okay, well done. So we're going to break up into groups soon. The groups are going to change a little bit this week just because our numbers have dropped, and also we don't have Kieran, who is one of our group leaders. He started back at university, and I think he's just pretty full on and he can't commit anymore. So anyway, hopefully the groups you'll be in tonight, if they do change from groups you've been in before, will be the groups for the rest of the course. Before I do that, I'm just going to run through quickly what we looked at last week. So I spoke about conditioned co-production, which was the distillation conceptually, as much as this can be done, of the Buddha's enlightened experience. And put very, very succinctly, changingness is at the center, at the heart of the universe, even at the heart of human experience. So this reality of conditionality has two modes. It has the cyclic and the spiral. And the purpose of human life for a Buddhist, from a Buddhist perspective, is to be moving from the cyclic to the spiral mode of conditionality more and more. And looking at it more in terms of the mind and the transformation of the mind, and the mind isn't just our rationalizing, conceptualizing functionings, it's also includes the emotional aspect of experience and the volitional impulse aspect of experience. So in terms of transformation, these modes of conditionality are often referred to as the reactive mind or the creative mind. So when we're in a cyclic state, in the cyclic mode of conditionality, we're in the reactive mind. Sometimes this is often referred to as habit, and it's obviously there are habits that are necessary and good, but a lot of the time their habits are unhealthy, or at least unconscious. We're just not aware of them going on, but they can really shape our experience and even partly define how we think of ourselves and how we think of life. So we're trying to move from this mode of conditionality into something that's more expansive, more creative, more original, spontaneous, responsive, okay, which is the spiral mode of conditionality. And we looked briefly at how we can do this, and the big thing is mindfulness. The big thing is just tuning into how we're actually doing. And the more we can do this, the more inner space we can develop, and then we can make more informed, creative choices about how we want to engage in a particular situation. And also then looked at just the effect of nature, the effect of art, the effect of meditation. So the homework for last week was to either do the mindfulness of breathing or the body scan, and to spend 10 or 15 minutes a day in nature. That was Prasanna Deva's edition, by the way. I had only said to spend 10 or 15 minutes once during the week, but he put in the notes. He's a real hard taskmaster, that you had to do it every day, so you can blame him. And the other was to partake or create art for 10 or 15 minutes during the week. So we'll bring those into the groups, and we can spend the time tuning in to how the week went and anything else that feels relevant. And then we'll come back here and we can have a bit more of a bigger session if we want to share, discuss anything, and then we'll have a tea break.
So this evening, I'm going to be talking about what is called the Fetter of habit. So actually, what I'm going to start with talking about is this thing called stream entry. So last week, Jyotika talked to us about the spiral path. He explained that the spiral path, in contrast with the cyclical path, which just goes round and round and round in circles, you don't really go anywhere. You just find yourself back in the same loop. You're stuck in the same cycle of habits. In contrast with the spiral path, which is a path that moves upwards and outwards in a kind of a spiral motion, which is qualified by creativity, expansion of consciousness, freedom, all those things. So this is the spiral path, the mind, the creative mind. And while it is infinite, this spiral path, it does have some discernible points of reference. So, you know, it never ends. It doesn't just keep going on and on into infinity. But there are some sort of points at which we can kind of use language to talk about it. So the furthest that we can see along this spiral path is what we generally call enlightenment or bodhi, awakening. So I described this as like the furthest horizon on furthest perceivable point. In a way, we can't entirely perceive enlightenment. We can kind of conceptually sort of grasp it, but we really don't know what it is. We only see the horizon line way off at the distance, and beyond that point, we can't really conceive of it. We have to actually get out there ourselves and just travel along the path of the Buddha's teaching and get there ourselves. So that's sort of the furthest point along the spiral path that we can kind of talk about, at least. But in the meantime, there is also what is called stream entry. So this is a sort of more tangible point along the spiral path. So stream entry is the point at which progress towards enlightenment, towards that horizon, cannot be reversed. You can no longer, you're at a point at which you can no longer regress. So my favorite sort of analogy for stream entry is that of the spacecraft. So with the spacecraft, say you have a spacecraft on Earth and it wants to travel to the moon. To get the spacecraft off the Earth, out of the gravitational pull of the Earth, it requires a huge amount of energy. A huge amount of fuel has to be used, heat is produced, and there's a huge amount of friction and it's quite dangerous as it's coming out of the Earth's atmosphere. So this can be analogous to the pull of samsara, that cyclical, uncreative, reactive mind that Jyotika was talking about last week. So that can be seen as the gravitational pull of the Earth. And at some point, as the spacecraft is traveling on its journey, it breaks free from the gravitational pull of the Earth. And the gravitational pull of the moon is somewhat stronger. So it would take more resistance to prevent that movement toward the moon, the satellite of the moon. And of course, the moon here representing the spiral path, the creative mind, and ultimately, the moon would represent enlightenment, that furthest path, and that transitioning from the pull of the gravitational field of Earth being to the moon being the stream entry. So it's that shifting of the gravitational forces is analogous to stream entry. You can no longer regress. You can no longer be drawn back into samsara, into the reactive mind. So I'm going to bring in another sort of system, another framework through which the Buddhist path is expressed, traditionally speaking. So this new system or framework is called the 10 Fetters. If you get into Buddhism, there's lots of numbers of lists of things. I'm going to spare you the list of what all 10 fetters are, because we don't have to do that for the sake of what we'll be talking about this evening. But I'll just say what a fetter is in general. So a fetter is something that chains us. It keeps us restricted. It binds us to samsara, to the reactive cyclical mind. And to breaking through to stream entry is synonymous with breaking what is called the first 3 fetters out of the 10. So for this course, we're actually really only going to be looking at the first 3 fetters. And tonight we're going to look at the first one. But the thing about these 3 fetters is you break all of them at one time. So you don't break the first and the second and the third. If you break one of them, any one of those 3 fetters, you're actually breaking all of them. So they all kind of come in one kind of package. We kind of say, well, why is it not just one fetter? Because it's actually kind of different facets of the self that coming from different angles. So the 3 habits are, the 3 fetters are habit, superficiality, and vagueness. So say that again: habit, superficiality, and vagueness. So tonight we're going to look at habit, next week superficiality, and in the last week we're going to look at vagueness. So as I said, these are 3 different perspectives on how you can look at the self, or the reactive mind, the samsaric conditionality. So what's this thing? So I'm just going to talk first of all about the fetter of habit, the first fetter. Usually translated as identity view or self-identification. So more traditionally, it's usually translated as that. Sanskrit is anatman. But Sangharakshita, the teacher and founder of this movement, he translated it as habit. So he chose this word particularly to draw out the Buddhist view that rather than us as individuals having habits, we are actually habits. We are habits. So we generally tend to think of ourselves as me, like a kind of I am here, and I have all these habits that I kind of attach to myself, or I have a habit. I mean, it comes in through how we talk about it as well. We often say I have a really bad habit rather than I am a really bad habit. I could say I have a really bad habit of biting my nails rather than saying I am a habit of biting my nails. So it's reinforced by the language we use. And we all tend to think of a me as, all that we tend to think of as me, or I, or myself, is actually just a collection of habits that our consciousness has gotten itself into, to quote Sangharakshita. And he also says that if it's something that we can get into, it is also something we can get out of. So I'll say that again. We tend to think of what we tend to think of as self or me is actually a collection of habits that our consciousness has gotten itself into. And if we have gotten ourselves into that, we can get ourselves out of that too. So in this way, to break the fetter of habit is really to break our identification with a limited self. To break the fetter of habit is to break our identification with a limited self. So often we can hear about Buddhism teaching no self, that there isn't any self. It's anatta is the Sanskrit word. But if you look at what I've just been describing, in a way, you could say it's closer to a new self, or a limitless self, rather than no self. You're constantly creating a self out of habit. And if you change those habits, we have a completely new self. So how do we break this fetter? Well, it's quite difficult, as I'm sure you have realized. Kind of breaking any sort of habit, if you try to do it at length, you'll know it's quite tricky. And what I've described might illustrate why it's so tricky. It actually goes against a mechanism that our consciousness has developed over hundreds of thousands of years, maybe millions of years. Not really well versed in the history of human consciousness, but definitely hundreds of thousands of years, the self has created these mechanisms in order to survive, and habit has, meant that we've been able to evolve and survive this long. So, habits have served us very, very well. The sense of a self has served us really very, very well, and has brought us a long way to this point in history. But that does make it very, very, very hard for us to let go of or change unhelpful habits, because in a way, our psyche has been conditioned in order to preserve self-preservation and preserve itself in a way. But it can be done, and I'm going to draw out 3 particular ways in which we can kind of look at that, at how we can break the fetter of habit. So we've already talked about the spiral path, and again, I'm just going to reiterate that. The creative mind is a primary way in which we can weaken our habits. We spoke about conditionality and the spiral path, the creative mind, and this kind of conditionality negates our habitual tendencies. When we create that gap, so we talked about the gap either last week or the week before, between the point at which we have a stimulus and a response to that stimulus outside of ourselves. And the more that we can kind of be in that gap, be in that space, the more we are making a choice about how we respond, rather than reactively, just habitually and reactively just responding or reacting to that stimulus. So the more we exercise that, the more that kind of gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the more agency we have to just really work against any habitual tendencies. It may mean we do the same thing we always did in a strange kind of way, but at least we've chosen to do that. So that's done by meditation, ethics, spiritual friendships and communication with people who are on the path with you. The spiral path is immense and very, very rich, and there's lots of ways to engage with that. Yeah. So another problem that arises when we try to break the fetter of habit is the fact that we are so determined by other people. The degree to which our habits are reinforced by ourselves is one thing, and then you have all the people around you who've come to know you to be a particular kind of person, and I even notice when I'm with a certain set of people, I feel I notice I behave in one way, then I'm in a different group of people, I kind of behave a different way, a little less as years have gone on. But I definitely have sort of friends where I'm a bit more looser with my tongue, or my humor might be a bit less skillful or kind. And I go away and go, oh, goodness, I didn't notice that before, how in that certain group of people, I'm a bit mean, actually, in how I talk about other people, you know. So who we are isn't just determined by our own view of ourselves or our own habits, but how other people perceive us and the habitual way we interact with others. So it gets really, really complicated. And Sangharakshita came up with this teaching called around the group and the individual. So there's quite a lot in this. So I'm kind of only going to give a little sort of brief account of it, but there's lots more that you could look into if this is something that sparks your interest. So the group and the individual is basically the idea that when we crave for group acceptance. So when we are interacting with the world, we often will want to conform to the group of people to which we sort of identify ourselves as being part of. And contrary to that, sometimes we rebel against that or react against it and actually want to be the complete opposite to the sort of group we've identified ourselves as being a part of. So you either kind of want to conform, or you just rebel and just try to do the sort of opposite. So you're kind of being defined by the group, either positively in the sense of you want to conform, or negatively in the sense that you don't want to conform with that. You want to just not be like that at all. So that's how, this is how we could say we often behave. But then the individual, or the true individual, is someone who is not mindlessly conforming to the group. So you don't just mindlessly try to fit in or behave in the way that the group expects you to behave. But neither are you going to just react against that and decide that you need to do everything that's the opposite, or that is contrary to what the group expects of you. And just to clarify, the group could be on a societal level, it could be familial level, it could be a group of friends, it could be an entire culture of a campus or university or a workplace. You know, there's lots of different layers of groups as well. So yeah, the true individual brings awareness to these tendencies of wanting to conform or react, and creatively responds in a manner that is truly based on what you yourself believe, your own values, rather than the values of the group. And of course, you need to know what your own values are in order to do that. I want to be very clear that this doesn't mean cutting off from the group. So it doesn't mean cutting yourself off from family or friends or work colleagues or whoever it is, whatever group it is. In fact, it's actually about engaging with these groups on a much, much deeper level in a way that isn't habitual. You know, we all have these, you know, in particular in my main practice with this, of these sort of family dynamics. You know, you have very, very strongly, deeply enforced habits and dynamics with family, because, you know, you've been with them since you were born. So they're very, very deep. And I don't want to cut off from that. I don't want to cut off from family. I want to cut through this habitual way of engaging, which is actually a barrier to them. In a way, I don't know my family that well. I only know my relationship to them. And by kind of stripping away these habits of how I interact with them, I see them more and I can engage with them on a deeper level. So it's not about cutting yourself off from others. It's about more deeply engaging in a way that's much more creative and brings you into much deeper connection with with those around you. And the last thing I'll say about the breaking the fetter of habit is you can't just do it overnight. As I said, there's, the human psyche has evolved for hundreds of thousands of years, not more. And we can't just decide, okay, I'm not going to do this habit anymore. I'm sure we've all had experiences of this. Habit, because it's such a deeply ingrained part of how we function, often it isn't just about breaking them, but taking on more positive habits. So deciding that we need to have routines or regularity in our life that creates a consistency, and the regularity needed to break down the unhelpful habits that we have. So in a way, it's somewhat contradictory. It's like taking on the habit that breaks down habit. So that kind of seems a bit like, oh, well, won't you eventually have to break down the habit of that habit? And yes, actually, you do. And but just to make that a bit more concrete, for example, the habit of meditating every day at the same time is a really good habit, and will actually help us to live more creatively and become more of a true individual, to meditate at the same time every day, because it is a practice of being in that gap that I talked about between the stimuli and your reaction to that. And the what was the other thing? Yeah, so anyway, the habit of meditating every day is a good habit. So there are good habits, and that's just one of many examples that I could pull up about how we just use habit to overcome habit. So for the breakout groups that we're going to go into shortly, I have a question. So the question is, what is your response to the idea that what you think of as yourself is a collection of habits? Rather than there being a person who has habits, you are a habit. So that can be quite strong to kind of think about, or that could evoke some strong responses. So it'd be interesting to hear from others about what they about your responses to that. So that could be something you bring into the breakout groups. So I hope that was helpful. There'll be an opportunity for questions after the breakout group, or just questions or responses. And yeah, I think that should be it. So whenever you are ready, Louise, we'll go into the breakout groups.